Good afternoon. It is Sunday, February 15th, 2026, and I'm hiking with the dogs at Mammoth Caves National Park. It's overcast, but it's a nice cool day. It had been raining all morning, and so I decided to hold off until later in the day when the rain stopped to take the dogs out. Despite that, it's actually a pretty busy day in the park, which makes a lot of sense given all the rain and snow and ice that we received recently that kept people indoors for weeks. And so it's nice to see families out on the trail. And I tried to choose a quieter place in the park where we might run into fewer people. But it is beautiful. Really, really gorgeous. And so I'm happy to be out here. And Mammoth Caves is located in Edmonson County, which is right next to Hart County, where I live. So it's only about 30 minutes away, and that's an experience that I've never had before, to live so close to a national park. Mammoth Caves is famous for being the largest known cave system in the world. And I've done a few tours in the caves where you can just walk around the large caverns. They have more extensive tours where you can actually put on gear and even stay overnight. Haven't done that yet, but hope to do so. It's only about 30 minutes away, so it makes it very easy to come here on a weekend or really even early after work during the week. And so I'm going to try and make the most use of living so close by. And I think that what makes Mammoth Caves unique in terms of the national park system is that it's one of the few places where you can actually take dogs out on the trail. If you've ever been to Yosemite or Zion and you brought your dogs, you might have been disappointed by the fact that they have a standing rule that paws on pavements. Dogs can only be where the grounds have been paved and where people can walk as part of their sidewalk system. And so unfortunately, some of the most beautiful areas of our national parks are off limits to dogs, understandably, but disappointing nonetheless. And there's a small cottage industry of pet hotels and places to board your dogs outside of places like Zion. And fortunately for me, that isn't true here at Mammoth Caves. And so we might see other dogs on the trail, and if we do, I'll just pull the dogs to the side and make sure that that everybody behaves. But right now it's feeling really quiet, and it's good to be out here. And so I wanted to take a different approach to some of my other videos. And I'm going to just try and get to the point. And I'll loop back to the reasons why. But essentially I wanted to talk about this concept that I've been thinking about over the last few days, and actually really just formulated over the last 24 hours. And it's this idea of being epistemically sovereign. And it's a strange term, I know, but I've been thinking a lot about my own self-identity and my beliefs. And yesterday was Valentine's Day, and I spent most of the day in Nashville, which was wonderful. But before I did that, I actually drove up to a town called Bardstown, which is considered the bourbon capital of Kentucky. And I wanted to go there because I needed to get food for the dogs. And there's this really incredible butcher shop there called Boone's, and so I tried to get there as early as possible. But I drove there in the morning, and and driving from Munfordville to Bardstown, you get on this road called the Bluegrass Parkway. It's really a highway, but it's this beautiful road that's cut through Kentucky limestone, which is this kind of dark blue limestone. And so I was driving this road and thinking and speaking into my phone using ChatGPT and asking it questions around belief and how I've come to form the ideas in my head. And that brought us to the topic of epistemology, which is the branch of philosophy that's concerned not just with what we know, but how we come to know the things we know. And so we talked a lot back and forth around ideas of the Enlightenment, which sounds hokey and maybe a little bit too esoteric, but I've been in an esoteric frame of mind lately. And a big reason for that is that I've experienced over the last few months a form of identity collapse. I guess what I mean by that is that I had, over the last couple of years, been in a very loving and serious relationship and had organized my identity around the hope of being a husband and maybe someday being a father. And that relationship unfortunately fell apart. And when it did, so did that self-identity. And so I felt for a while unmoored and have been in the process of trying to rebuild and also redefine my self-identity. And so in the tradition of reaching back to first principles, I started to think about how I came to form my own beliefs and how I know the things that I know in order to generate a more stable self-identity. And one of the things that I realized was that self-identity was a relatively new identity. Our family had lost my oldest sister in 2019 to cancer. We lost my father in 2021 to cancer and had a pretty serious scare in 2023 that we'd lose our mother to the same. And so what that did for me was make me think a lot about my mortality and the people that would be at my bedside when I passed. And one of the things that I really feared was not having family around. And so, timing being as it is, I met somebody that wanted the same. And so we tried to organize and build our life around that hope. And things fall apart. That's not a new experience for me, and it's certainly not an experience that is unique to me. And so many people can probably relate. And over the past few weeks and months, I've been doing my best to redefine myself and rebuild. And I know that she's doing the same. We're just having to do it separately. And one of the things that I realized is that being a father, being a husband, those aren't identities that I oriented myself around for most of my life. Actually, I'd always considered that something that might happen, but it wasn't a goal that I oriented myself towards for the majority of my life. I'd always wanted to be somebody that came to understand my reason for being here. And that's the self-identity that I think was subsumed by a more recent one of wanting to be a husband, a father, and to build a family. And so I've returned to that in some way. And this idea of being epistemically sovereign is part of that. And so what is sovereignty? Well, you can be a sovereign of a nation or a company or a household. And I'm not a head of state. I've never started and ran a company, and I don't have a wife or kids. And so the thing that's left to me is to be sovereign over myself, which is a form of self-mastery. And so that's really the focus of this period of my life, is to reestablish that. Hey, how are you? Good, thanks. Let me step aside. Come on. Good boy. Trail. Good. You too, take care. So yeah, whenever we walk on the trail and we see people coming through, we always let them pass. And so Marco is very good about stepping to the side of the trail and getting out of the way. And so the idea of epistemic sovereignty is that essentially I'm accountable for my thoughts and my beliefs. And part of that accountability is identifying it. And so, what does sovereign mean? Sovereign means supreme. It means the ultimate authority. And I actually think that that's a really, really important concept to build upon, especially in this day and age where it's so easy to outsource our thinking to our phones and spend all of our attention consuming rather than creating. And so it's a concept that I've not run into, at least not in a way that's explicit. And so I'm in the early stages of trying to define that concept for myself. But essentially, it's this idea that comes from the Enlightenment, and the idea of us being thinking beings that experience our world first through our minds and our thoughts. And so that dovetails pretty well with what Katie Clark has been talking about. And everybody listening might be very well familiar with Descartes' notion that I think, therefore I am. But what they might not be familiar with is Immanuel Kant's statement, dare to know. And yesterday I was thinking about that a lot and what that means, dare to know. And part of it is this obligation that we have to use our minds and to formulate our thoughts, even if it costs us. And I think that that's particularly important now when, as a society and as individuals, the technology is so powerful that we are easily manipulable. And so all of us lived through COVID, and many of us lived through the financial crisis and 9/11. And so it just feels like we've experienced this succession of shocks to ourselves and to the body politic without really having a good grasp of what those things meant or what they might have done to us. And so for myself personally, I think that I can be honest and say that, especially around COVID, I had in some ways failed the test. I was working in healthcare at the time, and I was very skeptical about what was being sold to us. And yet I went ahead and relented instead of putting myself at risk and communicating my skepticism and standing my ground. And so that's something that I regret, but at the same time is a point of learning for me. And I think that had I had a better sense of my own self-identity, that I might have been able to act more in accordance. I was somebody that was working in a job that stayed open during the pandemic, and that it was very important that I keep earning money just to pay my bills. And my self-identity was geared around somebody that was good at their job, that was responsible, and that would make certain sacrifices in order to maintain it. And so I did that, and I compromised, and many other people didn't, at great cost to themselves. And so I admire them for having done that, for their courage, for their willingness to speak out. And it's something that I will take as an example and hope not to repeat. And so I'm trying to define my beliefs and take accountability for actions in accordance with those beliefs. And so, gosh, it's gorgeous out here. These are trails that I haven't necessarily walked on myself, and so in some ways this is new to me. And I'm just looking ahead to make sure that I'm not going to run into anybody else that I might have to stand out of the way for. And so that's why I'm being particularly cautious and slow. So it's a rocky terrain, easy to lose your footing.